The council's chambers shimmered with cold, crystalline light, suspended above the dying heart of Arendor Prime. Stars, once bright and unyielding, flickered like dying candles beyond the observation windows. The air, or what passed for it, was thick with centuries of arrogance. The council had ruled the galaxy for eons, their influence unchallenged, their judgment absolute. And yet, in the outer reaches, an unremarkable species had begun to stir: humanity. Reports from scouts on the fringes of known space had reached the council in rapid succession. Colonies thriving on barren moons, survival in atmospheres toxic to most life forms, ships maneuvering with an ingenuity no other species had mastered. To the council, humans were chaotic, unpredictable, and ultimately disposable. Yet, as the reports stacked up, unease slithered into the edges of their consciousness. When human ships were detected near the Veil Nebula, a strategic choke point connecting several vital trade routes, the council's unease hardened into panic. Protocol demanded a response. And so, they convened a summit, a gathering of the galaxy's oldest and most feared minds. Each council member radiated authority, each word measured with centuries of diplomacy. But the decision they reached was swift and unanimous: war. Contain them, eliminate any threat before it becomes insoluble, intoned High Chancellor Vorin, his crystalline voice echoing through the chamber. Across the council, nods affirmed the deadly decree. Fleet coordinates were transmitted, warships mobilized, and planetary bombardments scheduled. To the council, it was simple. Humanity was to be crushed before it could rise. Half a galaxy away, Earth's leaders received the transmission. There was no panic. There were no cries of despair. Instead, Admiral Kale, standing in the holographic war room aboard the flagship Resolute, let a slow smile spread across his face. "They've forgotten who we are," he murmured. Around him, engineers adjusted energy matrices, strategists plotted trajectories, and scientists calibrated adaptive weaponry. Humanity had survived extinction before. This was merely another trial. The preparations were meticulous. Colonies previously thought insignificant had become fortified strongholds equipped with stealth drones, gravity mines, and adaptive AI capable of predicting council maneuvers. Communication channels wove together systems light years apart, allowing instantaneous coordination through quantum entanglement networks. Humanity's response would not be rash. It would be precise, patient, and deadly. Back at the council, confidence reigned. Reports of human ingenuity were dismissed as exaggeration, survival as luck. Few dared to question the decree aloud, for questioning the council's wisdom was tantamount to treason. Yet, in quiet corners of the chamber, whispers of doubt began to circulate. Admiral Soren, a younger member, leaned close to a colleague. "Do we truly understand them?" he asked. "We declare war, but what if we are the ones who will be unprepared?" The elder ignored him. Hubris had always been the council's armor. They believed themselves untouchable. And for now, humanity watched silently, their fleets hidden in shadow, their minds focused on one goal: survival. The first shots would soon cross the void. The council believed themselves the hunters. Humanity was ready to prove that even the smallest prey, when cornered and clever, could awaken a predator no one saw coming.
The council's fleets surged into human space like a tidal wave of crystalline fire, a spectacle of dominance meant to intimidate and destroy. Dreadnoughts bristled with energy weapons, frigates hummed with graviton torpedoes, and massive carriers loomed, carrying squadrons of precision drones. Every command, every calculation was executed with the cold precision of beings who had never lost. Yet, as they crossed the Veil Nebula, expecting resistance, they found nothing. Star systems they had mapped meticulously were silent. Ports were abandoned, cities dismantled, population signatures massed or scattered across multiple worlds. Entire colonies vanished, as though humanity had folded into the shadows of the void itself. The Council misinterpreted the emptiness as fear, their confidence swelling. Victory, they thought, would be effortless. Then the attacks began, but not in the form the Council anticipated. From nowhere, human ships struck with surgical precision. Small, seemingly insignificant vessels darted between the gaps in the Council's formations, deploying adaptive weapons that targeted crystalline holes in ways no one had predicted. Entire squadrons dissolved in seconds as gravity mines detonated in perfect timing, tearing apart the Council's largest ships. Automated drones, cloaked in stealth technology, disabled propulsion systems and key energy cores before the enemy could react. Council admirals were frantic. "Pull back!" one screamed into a communication channel now filled with chaos. But retreat offered no safety. Ambushes awaited in previously ignored systems, warp gates rigged with human technology capable of obliterating entire fleets. Each attempted maneuver, each tactical calculation was anticipated and countered. The humans were everywhere and nowhere at once, a phantom force that left destruction in its wake. Panic spread across the Council chambers. For the first time in millennia, doubt crept into the minds of the elders. They had assumed humans were impulsive, short-sighted, and incapable of long-term strategy. Now fleet after fleet was annihilated, and the patterns revealed something terrifying. The humans were learning in real time. Every attack, every response honed in next move. Where the Council relied on brute strength, humanity relied on adaptation and cunning. On the Resolute, Admiral Kale observed the results with calm focus. "They are not reacting, they are predicting," he said to his staff. Data from destroyed Council ships was immediately incorporated into the human tactical grid. Algorithms evolved, AI recalibrated, and every mistake made by the enemy strengthened humanity's defenses. It was not chaos. It was evolution, playing out in the theater of war. By the time the Council realized the magnitude of their miscalculation, the tide had already shifted. Systems that should have fallen under their control were now human strongholds, fortified with defenses that no crystalline weapon could breach. The first volleys had been fired, and the hunters had become the hunted. The Council, confident and arrogant, had declared war thinking it would be swift and glorious. Instead, they had awakened a force that moved faster, smarter, and far deadlier than they could have imagined. Humanity was no longer a species to be contained. They were a storm rising in the void, and the galaxy had yet to see the full scope of their wrath.
Decades had passed since the Council's first fleets entered human space. What had once seemed like scattered colonies were now interconnected fortresses spanning light years, each a hub of ingenuity and lethal efficiency. Humanity had transformed, not through sheer numbers or brute force, but through adaptation, strategy, and unity. Council systems, once untouchable symbols of absolute authority, now fell in silence. Entire fleets vanished without a trace, leaving no wreckage but drifting fragments of shattered dreams. Where once the Council had relied on overwhelming firepower, they now faced a species that fought like a living algorithm. Every move calculated, every strike preemptive. The human strategy was simple yet devastating. Hit where they were weakest, strike with precision, vanish before retaliation. Supply lines, communications, and command centers were dismantled quietly, like surgical excisions. Council admirals scrambled to respond, but every maneuver was anticipated. Human intelligence had become predictive, AI-guided, and virtually untouchable. Even the most seasoned Council tacticians could not outthink what they had once dismissed as primitive instinct. On the front lines, the humans moved as one organism. Quantum entanglement networks allowed instantaneous coordination across light years, creating the illusion of omnipresence. Fleets appeared and disappeared as if the void itself carried them. Colony defenses, previously small and scattered, now deployed gravity traps, orbital drones, and energy barriers that anticipated Council weapons signatures. A single human vessel could disable an entire battle group before anyone realized it had been engaged. Within the Council chambers, desperation replaced arrogance. High Chancellor Voreen paced before the observation windows, staring at systems falling like dominoes. "They are not just surviving, they are rewriting the rules of engagement," he said quietly. Elder members whispered in fear. For the first time in millennia, the Council realized a truth that had been buried beneath their hubris. Humanity had never been meant to be understood. They had to be survived. Meanwhile, humans did not revel in conquest. There was no gloating, no triumphalism. They simply continued their work with methodical patience. Each victory was a step toward a single objective: survival and preservation. Every system reclaimed, every fleet neutralized, was part of a grand design to ensure that the species that had endured against impossible odds would never again be underestimated. Stories of human ingenuity spread across the galaxy like whispered legends. Entire Council star systems had been paralyzed by a single human operative, a fleet reduced to debris by adaptive weaponry, and strategic colonies maintained through ingenuity rather than numbers. Humanity had become a ghostly force, a shadow of inevitability that haunted the Council's calculations. By now, the Council no longer merely feared humans, they were obsessed with understanding them. Yet understanding proved impossible. Every attempt to predict human action failed, every countermeasure became a trap, and every victory turned into a lesson for humanity's next move. In the silent void between stars, one fact became painfully clear. The hunters had become the hunted, and humanity's silent rise would soon culminate in a reckoning that no crystal fleet could withstand. The final bastion of the Council hung precariously above a dying star, its crystalline spires reflecting the faint light of worlds long consumed. Within the towering halls, panic was no longer subtle. It had become a roaring storm. Generals whispered desperate plans. Advisors quarreled, their voices echoing through the empty chambers. Every simulation failed. Every fleet sent to intercept humanity had been annihilated or rendered useless. High Chancellor Voreen, once the embodiment of the galaxy's unchallenged authority, gazed into the void. The reports were unmistakable. Human fleets were converging, not in numbers, but in precision, striking at the Council's nerve centers, cutting off escape routes, disabling energy shields, and dismantling orbital defenses. Gravity traps immobilized capital ships, and the Council's commanders realized too late that their crystal vessels, once symbols of invulnerability, were now fragile relics. Voreen attempted a final transmission, a plea for negotiation, but it was intercepted before it could even leave the chamber. Humanity had no interest in diplomacy. There was no malice in their advance, no gloating or celebration. They were focused, efficient, and unstoppable. Every Council system, every fleet, every stronghold was neutralized with surgical precision. The very forces the Council believed unassailable were rendered meaningless before they even understood the threat. The chamber trembled as the last of the Council's fleets fell, their light extinguished in the void. High Chancellor Voreen looked out at the silence, a galaxy once alive with power, now reduced to emptiness. Humanity had not only survived, they had rewritten the rules of existence itself. They had endured, adapted, and triumphed without arrogance or conquest. Extinction had been wielded as a weapon, and the Council had delivered it to themselves.
The humans did not celebrate. Across the galaxy, they reclaimed systems not for glory, but to ensure the survival of a species that refused to be contained. Humanity had become a living testament, underestimated at your peril. Where the Council relied on fear, humans relied on patience. Where the Council relied on dominance, humans relied on cunning. And in the end, dominance and arrogance were no match for the unyielding force of survival. As the last Council stronghold crumbled, drifting shards of crystal falling into the void like frozen stars, humanity moved onward. Not to conquer, but to endure, to watch, to adapt. And in the silent, shattered galaxy, a single truth echoed for all who would dare challenge them again. Never declare war on humanity, because survival, in their hands, is the deadliest weapon of all.